Okay, let's switch gears here. We've got limited time. Speaking of time, the New York Times has now named an unnamed source, supposedly a U.S. official, whatever that means, saying that Dutch intelligence last year picked up on communication that President Zelenskyy and Ukraine were going to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yeah.
CIA warned them not to do it, but ultimately stood down and allowed them to do it. Zelenskyy now swears he had nothing to do with blowing up the pipeline and said he would never do that to Germany. Is there any validity to this story, or does the Seymour Hersh story still ring as more reliable?
I don't believe anything from any Western media source on that issue at this point, because there's so much deception on both sides. Everybody's lying about everything. At this point, I go with Psy. So again, just think for a minute, Stephen, the whole idea of having that level of technical sophistication and understanding of underwater demolitions, you know, I'm pretty sure you can't take a bomb and put it at the bottom of a small ocean and blow it up. I don't have that skill. You don't have that skill. It's not something people just typically, get on a sailboat and go out and do. Oh, we're going to go out and blow a pipeline up. What? It doesn't happen like that. So no, I do believe Zelenskyy directed it. I believe the British enabled it. British, like us, share the technology, sophistication, and weapons demolition expertise in certain special mission units, and it was done with full approval of Sullivan and Biden. That's my view.
Okay. Well, we know that the New York Times for many years has pushed out propaganda more than truth. And whenever the new details come from the New York Times, I'm always very, very suspicious, especially as an independent journalist. Thank you for that. Okay. Heading back to the Middle East, an area that you know well. Iran is bragging that they can now domestically produce hypersonic ballistic missiles. Is this going to end up being sold into Russia like the drones, or is this just being used as a power play to keep the U.S. military at a distance? What do you think's the truth around, or the truth and the potential damage of them domestically producing a hypersonic ballistic missile?
So the hypersonic missile was a technology path we chose not to go down back in the 1960s and 70s. As much as that it's been hyped and been resurrected by certain forces, it's not the silver bullet like we talked about before that everybody looks to. One of the things that people tend to forget about this, well, first off, to highlight the fact that yes, I think I have no reason to doubt what the Iranians are saying to be true, that they're going to do this and are doing it. They've cooperated with Russia, China, and some other big names. So yeah, it's like on the nuclear program, I think they'll all cooperate behind the scenes. But I just don't think it's the silver bullet, as I was mentioning, that they all think it is. One of the things they tend to forget, Stephen, especially when the China was bragging about being able to take our aircraft carriers out with hypersonics. Anytime you have something moving super duper fast, I mean, we're talking like, 7 to 8, 10,000 miles an hour, very fast. A big plasma wave. I don't know. Just think of this. I don't know, as the missile. When you have something moving that speed, in front of it, you have a big plasma wave. You can't see through it. It's impervious. Your sensors can't see through the friction. That thing builds up friction. You can't see. Sensors don't work. So the precision that you need to have for a weapon of that aperture of explosive, if it's a conventional explosive, you want that to be delivered on a very small point. I mean, within like a meter of where you want it to hit. It's not that easy. You basically have to have it slow down. As you fire one of these things, Stephen, it goes and goes, and then it comes up to a certain point. It has to acquire the target, because these things are fired probably at least 100 miles, maybe more, away from each other. So there's a point where we've already found, and I think there's no secret here, Patriots have figured out how to take these things down. It comes out of hypersonic and has to just be supersonic, because it has to basically shed that plasma ball. that's when it's vulnerable, and it's got to then reacquire the target. And by the way, the target's probably moved if it's an aircraft carrier. So every time I hear this, oh, we're doing this, like, okay. I just think you're counting the enemy are counting on a single technology far too great. That's not going to give you what you think it will, but that's okay if you want to think that, because it's not going to happen. So I don't doubt that they're doing it. I don't doubt they're cooperating with the other BRICS countries in this, but it's just not going to be the silver bullet they think it is ultimately.
Right. You've probably seen this in the news. It's a big story right now. We're being told by Republicans in the House that Joe Biden is on recorded tapes talking to the energy executive at Burisma Energy about a $10 million payment to the Biden family in order to influence Congress and U.S. taxpayer money. $5 million to Hunter, $5 million to Joe Biden. We now have learned that the big guy is actually the nickname from the Burisma Energy executive, not from Hunter Biden. Do you think Republicans will ever get a hold of these tapes? Will the FBI destroy them, or what are your thoughts on this?
So the FBI will not destroy them, because I'm pretty sure the guy was smart enough to make copies. So if he gave them to the FBI, he still got them. So the FBI is not going to be. They're pretty dense at this point. I've watched some of the testimony of their current leaders recently. It's like, man, they're coming about. I don't want to say they look like Heinrich Himmler, but man, I'm just like, wow, fascism. So no, they're not going to destroy them. They're out there. It's just a question of, it's just a matter of time before they get out now. And Biden is acting like a man who knows that they're going to get out. I mean, the other day it was funny when he was asked the question. I think it was just yesterday. Someone asked him about the big guy, and his response was, "Well, why are you asking such stupid questions?" Which to me is like, that's like, what's that term? The police spontaneous utterance. It's like, yeah, why are you asking? I'm the big guy. I mean, he is. So I think it's just a matter of time. The question becomes, more importantly, will the American people demand something be done? Because it's very clear at this point, Merrick Garland, and you and I think, I've been trying to get people that I work with, former attorney generals, to do something, and I'm working with them on that. But this is another thing where people are clearly, I don't know how you accept a president who took between $5 and $30 million, depending on who you talk to, regarding the corruption of his office. Just think about it. This all fits together now. Him going after the prosecutor, trying to protect Hunter's bogus deal. He was paid to do that. Joe Biden was paid to make sure that Shokin and all those clowns would not interfere with the family enterprise of making money off of this. That's it. That's the bottom line. It's as base as it comes. It's what Spiro Agnew did while he was mayor of Baltimore and governor of Maryland, only on a broader scale. That's all it is. It's just everyday corruption.
Well, and you said that this is helping, like, put things together. Same thing. Wasn't Trump originally impeached because he asked Zelenskyy before this whole war, "Hey, I'm hearing that the Biden family was receiving money, that the Biden son was given this $80,000 a month job. Can you just look into this, and then we'll give you guys the money that the United States agreed." But now, boom, he gets impeached over this. And now, almost 4 years later, we're finding out that there was a lot of validity to why the sitting president was asking about the vice president and his family being bought off, selling out the American people to enrich the Biden family. My worry, though, is that the FBI, they've already tried every trick they can to hide just the documents. And now it's come out, many people on both sides in Congress have seen this document. They can't deny it anymore. But will they hide the tapes? That's my worry.
I don't know. Again, I think the guy was smart enough to make copies. I know I would have. I'd have copies all over the place, ready to go. So no, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that they know that. This shows us two things, though, Stephen. First, we have to recognize that the FBI is completely not recoverable at this point, at least not the leadership level. That any organization that will literally not only take the side, but actually engage in protecting the clearly illegal activities of politicians, they're no longer a neutral federal organization. They are an extension of the Democrat Party. That's something we all must be concerned about. Democrats I talk to are concerned about it too. It's just they have no leverage in their own party at this point. They recognize, they say it too, Stephen, but the ones who are conscientious can't do anything about it. They are literally the minority now. So I think anybody who recognizes this for what it is understands that the FBI has to be basically done. You need to basically disband the FBI at this point. It is not recoverable. And you can take the missions and give them to Homeland Security and the Pentagon for counterterrorism. Counterintelligence, same thing. You give DHS and Pentagon those missions, separate them up and do it. And then the investigative mission goes to the U.S. Marshals. That's it. You basically write off the FBI and say you're done. The mission and function of the FBI can and should be done, just not by the FBI.
Gotcha. Okay. Presidential hopeful Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said if elected president, he would strategically and systematically close down over 900 U.S. military bases around the world and bring our men and women in uniform home,
right,
to protect the United States, and then use that military budget to actually improve the lives of United States citizens. He regularly says, we wasted $9 trillion on the Middle East, and what did it get the American people? Nothing but debt. Yeah. So do you think there is any what's the word? I'm having a brain fart here. Is there any truth or wisdom? That's the word. Is there any wisdom to bringing home some of the military men and women and defending the country directly and repurposing that budget?
So I'm all for reducing our footprint overseas. I think we have become far too imperial for our own good. I'm not saying we should shut down everything, but I'm saying about half of what we have overseas is not useful and very expensive. The idea that we have to maintain physical presence is not something I think is in our interest, because normally in a lot of cases we become the target. The moment we're there, like in Syria, we become the target. So I'm not for large presence. Some places make sense. Germany, the Germans seem to be pretty happy with us there. Japan, we have bases in Japan. Korea would not be South Korea without us. I mean, that is one of the few times nation building actually worked. Just saying. I mean, that's the exception to the rule. Other places, there's just a limited need for us to be there in many instances. And I think we have to rethink that. My belief is, like before World War II, we had the ability to think expeditionist. That's terrible, that word. Expeditionary way, like we would put together capability based on what our needs were, not having standing stuff all over. Standing stuff, as you know, Stephen, you're a financial guy, very expensive. Maintaining presence, brick and mortar, very expensive. We could rethink that. As a matter of fact, I was all for the BRAC, going through and trying to figure out what we need and don't need. The federal government has so much unused. I mean, they could probably sell off half their holdings and make about $1 trillion. Seriously, I mean, they could do that. It's a choice not to do that. So I think Kennedy is going in the right direction with his thinking. Regarding mission and functions, I think that we should be much more focused on defending rather than expanding influence. Not to say we shouldn't be cooperative and help people if they want help, but it's not our job to be the policeman of the world. Do I believe we should protect lanes of communication and commerce? Absolutely. I debated Ron Paul on this when he and I were on John Stossel together when he announced for president a few years ago, and I debated them on this. And I disagreed with him. It's like, no, I think we do owe that to the world. If we don't do it, someone else will, and we may not like what someone else does. So that is more about national security out of enlightened self-interest, not because we want to be imperial. So I think there's a distinction with a difference to be made in those instances, and something that we should rethink. So I think if he gets elected, I think it's adequate to have that discussion about mission functions and where we're at physically overseas.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, staying on that same topic, I asked Scott Ritter and Colonel Douglas Macgregor if the U.S. military should be more involved with defending and protecting the United States, the United States southern border. Scott Ritter said no, it would be too dangerous to have military men and women potentially firing on Americans. And Colonel Macgregor said it's been done before, it should be done again. The military should be defending our borders directly. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Invasion by migration is a thing. It's happening. I've talked to a number of folks. I'm very close to a number of folks who are naturalized Americans. My family, 2 generations ago, came over on a Lusitania from Spain. I think it was 1910. And everybody I speak to who came here legally believes that legal immigration is wonderful. Illegal immigration really destroys the rule of law, creates all sorts of conditions for mafias and criminal organizations to benefit, and most importantly, to the left, it takes the bottom out of the value of work. An hour of work and what it costs drops precipitously when you have people who are not accountable or in the system. And so I love it, Stephen, when the left talks, oh, we want to have, all the unions must be taken care of. And yet they're doing everything they can to disadvantage the unions. They are. It's just like, how do you not see? Even Bernie Sanders recognized this at one point, saying that illegal immigration hurts the labor market, but nobody seems to be able to maintain the integrity of their beliefs or understanding. Somehow this. Oh no, we're fine with it now. We shouldn't be fine with it now. We need to recognize that the economic success of America is tied directly to our ability to defend our borders and our culture. And the longer we delay that, the more we allow woke ideas to permeate, and for unlimited and unmitigated, unrestricted immigration into the country does only degrades and weakens the communities. Every community this happens to, they're weakened. And I'm sorry, when Mayor Adams in New York complains about having to be dealing with all these folks, they made themselves sanctuary cities. They've asked for this. They've created the conditions for this. Their parties created conditions for this. So I do agree that it's time that we actually use military force as necessary. As a matter of fact, I would be happy to put the uniform back on and lead an effort to do that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, my family came to the United States many generations ago legally.
Yep.
I love, I use the Spanish. I speak Spanish to people and stuff. I love the people that come here. What's interesting is most of the people that came here legally are against illegal immigration.
Bingo. That's my experience. Absolutely.
And they feel cheated, and now those resources are being watered down. And but the thing that's scariest is we don't know who's really coming across the border if 1 million people are able to sneak in. And I know that you still serve on different boards or committees that have to do with the southern border, and so you hear about terrorists sneaking into the country, and bad people that we don't want. That's where I think we could eliminate some of that by having at least a military presence on the southern border.
So the military. So let me tell you a quick story about this. There are a number of us who saw this coming years ago. As a matter of fact, that book there, The Last Line, Stephen, I highly recommend you pick it up. It's all about what we're talking about. I saw that this was 10 years ago. I saw this in the 90s, that we were going to have huge problems with this because no one seemed to understand Mexico was a cauldron, that the lack of governance, effective governance, was going to result in ungoverned spaces. One of the things I've seen over my coming up on 40 years of national security service, ungoverned spaces is something you cannot permit. The moment you have ungoverned spaces, one of two things come in to fill it: criminal organizations or terrorists. It always happens. So in absence of a government that is effective and can protect the people and their equities, you will have these things come in. Syria fell to terrorists. Libya fell to terrorists. Mexico has fallen to criminal mafias. It is what it is. So we saw this back in the 90s. I was the senior intelligence officer for Joint Interagency Task Force East, JATF East, as the senior clandestine guy, working for Tom Costarino. Tom, if you're listening, God bless you. Enjoyed the time we worked together. And we recognized, Army recognized at the time that as much as we were tasked to do counter drug support, that was our mission to Stephen, to help the Navy in what we call the transit zone. Basically, the transit zone is that area of ocean and land from Colombia all the way up to Mexico, the transit zone. So we were working to help Navy gray hulls go intercept drug boats, submarines, things like that, and helping the Air Force intercept aircraft coming in from, Colombia, flying all the way up into the interior of Mexico. So my job was to develop intel to help them do interdictions. Well, incidental to learning that mission, I was a very young captain. I was still in charge of the Army clandestine program as a civilian, but as a reserve captain, I would go down and learn. I figured it out. It's like, this is bad. I mean, this is going to get real bad because this is not governed space. We're partnering with organizations, law enforcement and military, that have no interest or capacity to win. They're not going to win. So in Mexico in particular, you would have drug shipments fly in, dropped off, and there they go. They're off. No government so it's like, so I said we should do essentially intelligence preparation of the battle space in Mexico. That is to say, it was very controversial. They were probably still pissed at me to this day. I said, look, we've got to figure out how to map Mexico as if it was a bad guy country. Oh my God, I can't believe you're saying that. What do you mean? It's like, I'm telling you, all the drug mafias, all the things that are going on down in criminal activities, we have to map it as if they're an enemy country, and we have to understand what's going on. Hugely controversial. People went nuts. As a matter of fact, we proposed it. Army was willing to do it. God bless Army. The leadership in Army went along with me and said, yes, we're signed up to this. So we Army were willing to put skin in the game, to include funding our piece of it. That is to say, take military funding, intelligence funding, and saying, we think this is an issue. You want to know who shut it down?
Yeah.
You want to know? You want to guess who shut it down? Who said no to it?
This was in the 90s.
90s.
Clinton?
No. What federal organization? Which may have been directed by him, but
who?
The DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration.
They didn't want to know where all the drugs were?
Nope.
Wow.
Yeah, no. So we had this all done. We had a cute little code name for it. Doorhawk. No, what was it called? I can't remember. I'll think of the name in a second. Toxicogenic goose. That's a name for you. And so we had this all planned out. We were going to work with the Navy. The Navy was going to, Navy's crazy enough to go along with us sometimes too. It's like, yeah. And the Coasties loved it too. Because Coasties were involved. The only agency that said no was DEA. And I kind of understand why, looking back on it now. But so my point to you is, many of us saw this coming, and we've tried to warn people over and over, but nobody seems to want to actually do what's necessary. And therefore, because we've delayed, we've obfuscated, we've ignored this so long, all you have left now is to basically arm up and man the border with military forces. This was preventable, and we chose not to prevent it.
Wow. Well, always good to be with you. This has been a fascinating discussion. I wish we had recorded the pre-show, but maybe we'll bring some of that stuff up. Colonel Tony Shaffer, thank you for your time, your service to our country, and for being on today.
Thank you, Stephen.